Okay, so now we're going to talk about some ways in which we can use the built-in features of Brightspace to help create a somewhat more supportive and inclusive environment in classes. And what I'd really encourage you to do, if you're participating now or if you're watching this later, to open up a Brightspace and just play with some of the things we're going to be doing. I'm going to give first an overview of what we're going to be doing and why, and then we'll move into the actual implementation of some of these features. One of the things that's important is structure. This is something that Vijay Sathi and Kelly Hogan have emphasized in a lot of their work, and it was summarized in their book on inclusive teaching. And basically, they suggest that structure is important for all students, but it especially benefits students who are from traditionally minoritized groups, from students who are first-gen students, and students who haven't been exposed to a very strong college preparation environment in their middle schools or high schools and so forth. So what do we mean by structure? Would anyone like to define structure? Jessica? Zoe?
In my class, I think it's giving them kind of a roadmap for what's to come, I guess, and giving them specific kind of guidelines, timeframes, being transparent about what the course is going to cover, having those learning objectives, everything from giving them videos to rubrics. I think that all kind of plays into my structure, I think.
Okay, yeah, that, students who come in who've taken some pre-college courses while they were in high school, who may have taken some AP courses, or students where just a lot of students go on to college have already done many of the types of assignments that we give. And for those students who haven't, when we ask them to turn in an annotated bibliography or to turn in an outline for a project proposal or to do something else that they've never been exposed to doing. If we ask them to write a paper without really telling them what we expect in that paper in terms of citations, in terms of the length, in terms of the type of analysis we'll be doing, and so on, we probably shouldn't expect them to do as well as those students who have already done that multiple times. So the structure is just making all those things explicit and clear, because we really want to test students on their learning, not on their prior preparation in terms of the types of assessments that we use. So it's basically just having students focusing not on the logistics of the work, but focusing on learning the content. And we can make that easier by simply making those other things explicit. And in general, there are many studies that focus on how increasing course structure increases learning. And I can share these slides with anyone later. Usually I put in a link to that. I guess I forgot to do this here. But here's an example in biology, which apparently is popping up. And it basically talks about how increased participation in persistence increases as in a post-secondary mathematics course as a result of building more course structure into this was said to be bio, but it appears to be actually a math course. So I'm not quite sure what I did there, but apparently I messed up. Eddie and Hogan, that's Kelly Hogan, one of those authors I mentioned before, have introduced more structure have done a study focused on the effect of introducing more structure into a statistics class at NC State. At university, this is one of those religious wars down there, at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And Barr and Wessel talk about the work in math. And I may have put the wrong link in there for that. But in any case, Vijay Sathi and Kelly Hogan summarize this again in their book, Inclusive Teaching, which was one of the things we did for a reading group here a couple of years back. And some of the ways we can add structure, one of the reasons for adding structure is that it reveals a hidden curriculum, those things that people who are comfortable with college, who've done a lot of work with college, or who have family members who've gone to college and talked to them about it, or who have lots of friends who've gone off to college, or older siblings and so on. the types of things that you learn through experience that aren't always made explicit. Just as an example, when students go to college, unless they've heard someone talk about this before, they have no idea what a bursar's office is, or what a registrar is, or what they do, and so forth. And so there's a lot of things that we just kind of assume about college because we've been doing it for so long ourselves, and because we had some assistance as we went through. But the same type of thing is true with assignments, that, you know, there have been many times when I've given assignments and I've gotten back things that are entirely different from what I expected students would turn in. And it's because my expectations and theirs do not always align. And it aligns pretty well for students who've had similar type of work in the past. So the basic goal here is just to make explicit and clear and transparent what we want students to do so that they can focus on learning those skills rather than trying to guess at what our expectations are. It's also a lot more enjoyable reading work that meets the type of criteria we'd like it to have, rather than to have to go back and explain to students, well, no, this is not what I asked you to do, because we didn't really make explicit to them what we wanted them to do. And so the goal is to provide all students with the resources they need to be successful when they need it. And this also includes supportive materials. Our students are coming in with dramatically increased variance in their prior preparation. And that's particularly true in reading skills, math skills, and so forth. And all the standardized test scores suggest that this has been increasing significantly, but it kind of exploded during the pandemic and hasn't entirely settled down yet. We haven't quite resumed to a higher level of overall general preparation. But again, the key is to make sure that students have the resources they need to be successful, which might include YouTube videos, it might include links to tutorial material, and it might include other support resources that we can provide in our classes. And also, and this is something that came up in our spring reading group, that let students know that you care about their success and emphasize. And we'll talk a little bit about some research on that going in just a couple minutes. One approach is, as I mentioned in the reading group we had this time by David Yeager, the use of wise feedback. When you give students feedback, Yeager and his co-authors have shown that just reminding students that you have high expectations, but you know that they can meet them, results in a much stronger increase in student performance, higher retention, and they're more likely to take into account the feedback that you provide. A study by Carroll and Kurlander in 2020, which was done in economics classes, suggested that was in a couple of institutions, I believe it was, that providing students who were struggling after the first two exams with a message indicating that it's normal to struggle and that there are resources available and you're willing to help them, but they, you know, that you are there to support them and they can be successful. And just providing a link to some resources or reminding them about your office hours or sharing links to some material that would be helpful results in significant increases in performance. And the interesting thing there is they showed that that was also effective up to 5 years later, that when students were provided with this, they were more likely to have higher grades and they were more likely to persist out to 5 years beyond that initial intervention in an introductory economics course. And Canning, White, and Davis, and Elizabeth Canning has done a lot of these studies, suggested that messaging after the first couple of exams or graded assignments about the growth mindset also leads to significantly higher student performance. And there's a lot of tools we can use to help automate some of this. One is a checklist tool. It's a great way of providing structure. If you divide your course up into modules where students are working on a given set of materials at a given time on a given body of content, just providing a checklist of what to do and in what order can be helpful, and asking students to check off the boxes as they do that. Students have, every time I've done this, have said they wish that many other instructors would do this because they found it really helpful in providing a reminder of what was due when. Another thing you can do is if you're providing a lot of support resources, You can use accordion files to simplify the navigation, and I'll show some examples of that. Another thing, and we'll talk about this in just a few minutes, is using intelligent agents to remind students of approaching due dates, or many other things as well. You can also use it to automate that process of providing growth mindset messaging when students are struggling, and to share relevant support resources. And again, to remind them that you are there to support them. Okay, so those are the basic things we're going to do. So let's go into Brightspace to see how we might do some of these things. And I've got these controls back on the screen again. There we go. So I'm going to jump back into my course, into one of my courses here. This was my fall microeconomics class where I've got examples of many of these things. So I'm just going to go to content just to show a little bit about first the checklist, okay? And here, what happens is in each module, they start with the same type of thing, the overview of the module, talking about what the module is about, what they'll be doing. Then there's a checklist. Then this is essentially the reading. It's something similar to an adaptive learning platform provided through Lumen Learning. Then there's some video quizzes where they get to watch some videos I created with embedded questions on the topics that they're still likely to have some problems with after they work through the basic readings and problems. And then there's some additional supplemental videos, and then there's a quiz at the end. And there's formative assessments all the way through here, and these are also formative assessments they can take over and over again. But if we look at a checklist that we can, well, I can jump, well, I can't jump directly into student view here without taking us out of this module, but it looks something like this. That's the module overview, I'm sorry, but we'll get to that. This is responding slowly. Let's try the checklist again. So this is what the checklist looks like. And it tells you there's a group of things they have to complete. They have to complete the study plan sections by this date. And I have this for each and every one of my class days. So they should come in having read through and worked through the practice problems on this by October 29th. This was the 9th week of classes. There were 2 videos they were supposed to watch and complete, again, as a formative assessment. And then they complete the study plan on the next set of topics for the next class day. There were some other videos due, and they were both due on the same date, which was again the next class. And then by the end of that module, they had to complete the test. And let me show it from a student view. That would actually be a better view, but let's see. We get to that from here. And let me come back. I'll take the same module just so it's consistent. Module 9 was, apparently I didn't take 9 of the quizzes myself. So now from a student view, it looks like this. And what happens is it shows the item, it shows a due date, and when they finish it, they just check it off. And that'll allow them to remind themselves of what things they've done and what they haven't done. And it's all set up in the order in which they'll do it. And then I encourage them to review videos as needed, because those are basically to fill in any gaps if there were things that they still didn't understand after we worked through things in class, the problems we do in class, after they watch the videos, after they've completed the readings and the formative assessments. So these are truly optional, but some of the students end up using them a lot. Not always the ones who need them the most, but at least they're there for everybody. Okay, so that's one of the things we can do. And again, students find it really helpful, and we'll start by doing that. We're going to jump back in, and we will hop out of this session. I'm sorry, we will hop, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. We will go right back here and show how to create a checklist. And this is under Course Tools, and you go down to Course Admin. And I'd encourage you just to try this and go down to communications, I believe. Yes. No, checklists are under assessment. So under assessment, go to checklist and click on that, and it will show you any of the checklists you created. And once you've created one, you can use that as a template and just copy it and update the content and the materials. But we're going to create a brand new one. Okay. And here, let's call this module. There's 14 modules in this class, so I'll call this a module 15 checklist. You can name it whatever you want. It's just makes it easier for you to keep track of what it is. Here you could put in a description of it. I generally don't because I've got most of the relevant materials in the module overview and so forth. But if you want, you could put something in it. And if you're going to do this in each of the modules, you might want to put in something reminding students to please check this off as they go through and each module, just so they don't forget any of the work or when it's due. You can have it open in a new window. I generally have it right in Brightspace, so I don't do this. And so here's a new checklist. And that's a basic structure. But now what you have to do is you have to add, at the very least, new items. But what you may want to do is break it up into categories. If you notice, in that checklist, I had some things where students were supposed to do something, they were supposed to watch something, and there were some things they were supposed to complete. You can break that, you could either just have one category, or you can have as many as you want. I did it that way because it was a little bit easier for students to know what was going to happen when they did this. You know, you could have one for assessments, you could have one for formative or practice assessments, whatever you want. Let's say we're going to create a category of, let's call this formative assessments. But if you do that, make sure you let students know what this is, because they probably haven't heard that term. You could perhaps instead call it something like practice problems, or, whatever works. Okay. And then that would be now a new category. And I could have clicked save and new, but I was too late to do that. Let's do another one, and let's call this summative assessments. And again, if you do that, you may want to explain what that is, or you could give it a name that students are more likely to recognize. But for now, let's go with this. So you've got two categories now, and we're going to add an item. And the item is going to go into, I guess the first one I call practice problems. And here is you put in whatever text is going to show up. So let's say maybe these are reading quizzes, or whatever it is. Or let's say before you even do that, reading quizzes, that would be good. You can describe it here if you want. You don't have to. Now, if it is going to be something that's going to be graded, you don't have to put well, you should put the due date there, but you could choose to display it in the calendar or not. If you have a quiz or some other type of an assignment in Brightspace that already has a due date on it, you don't need to display this in the calendar too. You'll end up with double listings, which is probably not an awful thing, but just to keep it cleaner, I generally will display this in the calendar if it's not something that is a graded assessment that already has a due date defined in the calendar in the assessment itself. But if it's something like, for example, if it's to read a chapter in a book that's not in Brightspace, you could choose to put this in the calendar, whatever works for you. But having it in the calendar one way, at least one way, makes a lot of sense. And you just pick the day, and let's say this is due, let's say this is due at 2:30 a.m. Well, we probably should make it tomorrow instead of today. Okay. So there, now we have this reading quiz, which is due tomorrow, well, in just a few hours, actually. And then it's not in there, so let's put it in the calendar. So it's now in the calendar. So that's one item. And basically what you would do is you would just keep adding items in whatever category is appropriate. And they've said, well, before we test people on this, maybe we should add another category called read. And I usually just do something like that, and we'll save that. And let's say we'll add a new item here called read chapter or whatever. Read chapter 1, since this is due in just a few hours, we probably don't want to get too far in. And again, you could put it in the same due date. Let's make it due tomorrow at 5. Well, we should probably have it maybe at 1 a.m. And since they're supposed to take a quiz on it by 2 or whatever that was. And we'll put that in the calendar because that won't otherwise show up in the calendar, at least. And now we've created a checklist. And so when students see it, they will see a grouping called practice problems. They will see summative assessments, and they will see, oh, but you notice I put this in the wrong thing. So I'm going to go in and fix that. That was done intentionally, maybe, sort of. And I'm going to put this in and put it in the reading category. And now that will be listed as the item there. So they have practice problems. They have with reading quizzes or one type or one of them. And you could put reading quiz 1 or whatever. You could put in some of the assessments if you have it, but you probably want them to read the material first. So what we're going to do now is just do a reorder. So what we're going to do there is we want read to come up first. So we'll put this at the top. So and we'll save that. And now what's going to happen is you can always reorder it. So you want them to read chapter 1, you want them to do these practice problems, and you probably should name it. Let's go back in and edit this and say reading quiz 1. There, just to make it a little bit more realistic. And now we've created a checklist. And then when you're ready to embed that in the course, you would, let's save and close this. So you created the checklist, and now you would go over to the content, and I'm going to stick this in and then get rid of it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm already in this module, and I am going to go to existing activities, and the existing activities include checklist. So you go to existing activities, then checklist, and then you will have, this was a module 15 checklist, which is now going to show up at the bottom. But which is going to show up, there we go, at the bottom. But you probably want the checklist nearer the top, just so students can see before they get further along what to do. And so there it is. And when students click on it, it will show them each of the categories and all the things they have to do along with the due dates. And when you've checked the boxes to put it in the calendar, that will show up in their Brightspace calendar. So anytime they go into Brightspace, it will tell them as those dates approach and so forth. Any questions on that? And again, you can use whatever format works best in terms of the categories and the items. And I am going to get rid of that so that I'm going to use this as a basis for my fall course. So I probably don't want 2 checklists to be there in that same module. So I want to delete it both from content and so forth. Done. Okay, so that's how to use checklists. And it's not very hard to do. But one of the things I did say is it's really also helpful to go back in. And once you created your first one, if you're going to have similar types of assignments, once you created that first one, and I did delete module, no, I deleted it from the course, but it's still here. So what I'm also going to do here is make a copy of this one. And now that it's here, I can use that as a starting point. So this will now be the module 16 checklist, let's say. And then I would just update each of the items. The categories may stay the same, maybe not, and you would just retype this. So now maybe this is read chapter 2 under reading for the next module. And I probably want to change the due date on that too. So, I'd update that, and let's have that due. Let's say this is a 1-week course. Let's make that due the next day. There we go. Okay, and basically that's all you need to do, getting rid of the copy of here, because this should be module 16 checklist now, and we will save and close that. And now we have a new checklist after you've updated it and saved it. And then you would just go into module 16 if one existed, and you would just choose add existing activities, checklist, find the module 16 checklist. It'll go into the bottom of the list of items and drag it up to the top. And it's right there as a set of reminders. Okay, so any questions? Okay, then the next thing we're going to talk about is using replace strings. And a really handy use of that is if you're doing announcements. I'm not going to actually send this out, but if we go to announcements, because it would go to my full students, and they don't really need another announcements at this point. So I'm going to put in, let's just say, test announcement. And when you do that, I'm just going to say hi. And then to make it seem more personalized, I'm going to put in the replace string, which is in curly braces.
Yes.
That was my recollection. First name. Sometimes I forget whether it's in curly braces, and then I look it up. And then I put in whatever text there, and then etc. And what will happen is when this goes out to the student, it will show up as hi and then their first name. And that just makes things a little bit more personalized, and that'll go to their email as well, and with the replace string in there. And it's really amazing the effect that names have. There's been a lot of research on names. One simple thing is that this is a cocktail party effect, it's been called by psychologists. If you're at a really noisy party and someone across the room mentions your name, all of a sudden you tune right into that conversation. The same sort of thing seems to happen when you get emails or things that are addressed to you personally. It seems less likely that it's spam, although that's not quite as true as it used to be, because we get a lot of spam that's been generated from mailing lists with our names. But when they see it's from the course and it has your name there, it just gives it a little bit more focus to that. And that's a really good thing to do. Now, the only problem sometimes is when you do this, if it's just a general announcement, maybe about concerns or about people having problems in classes, if it goes out to a class of 400 students, it might be misperceived as something that was sent to them specifically, which might prompt a lot of reply emails, which might be appropriate, but maybe not if you've got 400 students. As an example, for a while there, when I was sending out CELT announcements about workshops or about things coming out from SUNY, I did include this as a replace string, and with the first name of faculty members, and I got probably 10 or 12 responses from people, including some in the administration, responding to the email, as if I had written it specifically to them, which again, may prompt more communication. And in fact, one of the goals of using this in classes, especially when you're in larger classes, is when students get emails personalized to them, it will, again, seem a little bit more likely that you're talking to them, you know their name and so forth, even if it's automated, and they're more likely to come in and talk to you about things. And the system I'm using, the Waymaker platform, also automatically does that. And it's amazing how many responses I get over the course of a semester. Now, what I'm going to do here is cancel it. You could put in start dates and end dates and all that, add attachments, just like you do with any other email. So I am going, though, here to delete this. And I delete this by, well, let me save it as, well, I'm going to just cancel it. So it's not going to actually even create it. Okay, but this is a nice way of sending out personalized messages. It's a good way of sending out a message to students at the start of the semester, mentioning their name and so forth. Okay, so that's another simple thing you can do, where if you're going to send an announcement anyway, you just include that first name as a prefix to it, and it makes it a little bit more personalized, or maybe personalized, more individualized, because it's not really quite as personal. But the other thing we're going to do, and this is really powerful, is to use the agents. So we're going to go back here under Course Tools to Course Admin, and we're going to go down here to Intelligent Agents under Communication. And these are incredibly powerful. Here's one that I created right at the very beginning, at the start of the semester. It was run last on August 29th, right when the semester was underway, where there was some formative assessments they were supposed to do. And here is the reminder. It's a reminder, and it basically, the agent is enabled. I'm going to disable just so I don't accidentally re-trigger it. And you pick a date when it's going to go out. In this case, it was a one-time run, so I didn't need a schedule. And you pick the criteria. Always select all use is visible with the class list, because we generally in our classes don't have specific roles. You would have specific roles if you wanted to send it out to TAs or teaching assistants or mentors. There's a lot of different roles that could exist within a Brightspace course, but virtually none of them are configured in Suning for our individual courses. So send it to everyone in the class list, which would include all students. And if you did happen to have undergraduate TAs, they get it too, but they at least know more about what's going on by getting this. And here's some things you could do. You could have it tied to login activity or course activity. I would generally, if you're going to just send a reminder about logging in, I would probably select course activity, because login activity is whether they've logged into Brightspace or not. And in your class, you may not really be concerned if they happen to have logged into their art history class, or if they've logged into their Spanish class. You're going to be more concerned with whether they're participating in your course. So course activity would be to set this up. And we'll go through an example of that in just a moment. But this one wasn't for this purpose. This was one where it was for a student who had not received a grade for the study plan economic thinking, which again is a combination of readings and formative assessments. And it was just a little reminder. And then I sent out an email. The first time the agent's criteria was satisfied, it only ran once, so it didn't really matter. Sometimes you might want to do something repeatedly. If you have something where you want to send repeated reminders, I suppose you could do it hourly, but that would be kind of mean. And they probably just send you to the spam folder. But if it's something where you want to check regularly, for example, whether they've logged into your course, especially in an online class, you might want to do that weekly or maybe a couple times a week. And in that case, you might want to do it every time the agent is evaluated. And then it would go to, in this case, I had it send an email. And you notice here, ooh, and there is a typo there. You notice here, instead of going to the first name, it went to the initiating user, which is the email address of the student that triggers this. And we'll go through this step by step. And when I do it, I normally have a copy of it go as a blind carbon copy to me, so I can see who's getting the emails, and how many of them there were and so forth, although you could look that up. And this was just, a reminder. This was the first week of class. And here you notice this string. Well, here you notice this is what can I use? We'll go through that in a second. But this is a string you would use when you're doing a mass mailing using an intelligent agent. It's initiating user first name. And then, this was kind of a little harsh. I should have made it a little more friendly. But basically, for this to work, because this is taught as a flipped class, that it's a reminder that they should come to class prepared. And this was, as of now, you have not completed either of the first two topics in the study plan for Module 1 and did not complete the self-assessment at the end of the topics. And please try to complete these before we meet at 2:20 today. And this went out early in the morning, just as a reminder that they hadn't done the work they were supposed to do for that day's class. And it only went to the people who had not completed that specific, had not received a grade. Because if they received the grade, they had gone through and worked on it, and they had, et cetera. Okay. So we're going to just cancel that. I don't want this to go out and trigger it, but we're going to create a new agent. And this is one of the simplest agents you can create. And this is just a login reminder. And this is a weekly login reminder. And you can also create categories for these too. I'm not going to create a category for this because we're not going to keep it, but you might have, for example, I have some reminders that are assignment reminders, some reminders about grades. You can set up in a reminder that will check students' overall course grade and send out a reminder if it drops below a threshold. And you can have it do that weekly, for example. Or you might only want to do it once and then have a new one a few weeks later or whatever. So this is what, so you can put in whatever description you want. Again, here I had categories. I've got reminders, login reminders, study plan reminders, quiz reminders and a practice example. I guess I must have used a practice example in a past workshop, but it's still in there. Okay, so you can choose a category. You would want to enable it, but not until you're finished. It's unfortunate that it's up at the top. Let's say we want to do this. Let's say this is for a fall course. We want to do this. Again, you could do it hourly if you want. You could do it just once, or you could do it only when you call on it. But let's say we want to do a weekly login reminder. And let's say we want this to repeat every week, every 1 week. And let's say we want it to repeat just once a week, let's say on Thursdays. And you pick the time. Let's say we want to do this, let's say at 3:30 a.m., because that way we catch the students when they're coming back from the bars and so forth, or if the people who are getting up really early, or they'll wake up to this email. You could put in a start date for it. You can put in an end date for it. So you could have this do it from, let's say this is in the fall. Let's say we're going to start this on, let's say August, I don't remember when we start, but let's say we want to start it on August 28th. And we want it to end on sometime, it has to be after the beginning date. So we'll go out here, let's say in December. Let's try that again. The end date has to be in December. Oh, come on. It's moving. It's jumping around on me. Let's say December 15th. There we go. And now every week it's going to go out and it's going to check here this criteria. And the criteria we want to do is, again, all users visible in the class use. And we want it to be on course activity, whether they've logged into the course. And let's say in the past 7 days, we probably don't want to check every day if they've logged in the past 24 hours. But if they haven't logged into the course and you're doing a lot of work in Brightspace, if they've been gone a week, that could be a bit of a problem. And then you create the release. Well, that is a release condition, but there's others, and we'll show those in a minute. We'll just leave those for now. And we're going to go to the action and say, take action every time the agent is evaluated. And you want to send an email when this is done. And this would be to, and now if you don't remember what the conditions are, and it was initiating user, but you can do this. It's right below. What special email addresses can I use? And you see it's initiating user. So you could just copy that. Now, initiating using auditors would be whoever is auditing it, which if we had, say, students who were being audited by their athletic director or by student assistant, student support specialist or whatever, you could put that in too. And I would normally put my own address here as a BCC. So I'll get a reminder. If you want, you could do it as a CC and then the students would see it. But, you know, it's mostly just so I see that this is working and it's gone out and so forth, and say login reminder. And it could say something, you know, you could make it really nice and friendly or something. And you could put hi. And here I want to use a replace string. And again, most of these aren't really useful because the org name would be SUNY Oswego, the code for, you know, these other things are all for the SUNY internal thing, which is useful if you're doing things across multiple campuses. But we just want really this, the initiating user first name. We want to be a little more friendly than just their last name. And we can just copy and paste and put it right here. And then we go and it says, this is a reminder to regularly log in so you can keep up with your work or keep on track to be successful in this course. You know, and you could put in more detail than that and so forth. And then you could save and close. And once you do that, the only other thing to do is to go up here and make sure you check this agent is enabled right here. And now, once I save it, it would then begin doing this in September for anyone from this class who hadn't logged in, except these students will be in other classes by then. So I'm not going to do that, but you would save and close and it would then work. So I'm just going to cancel this whole thing, but that's how you would do it. And I think I have one in here like that somewhere. It was probably one of the early ones. Pretty sure I have one. Well, maybe I don't. Oh, here it is. A line login reminder. This was a test. In any case, once you have done this, you can always check one of these. Here's an exam 3 reminder. And you have an interesting thing here. I'm sorry. That's not what I wanted. One more time. So what you can do here is there is an option of, let's say exam 3, you can do a practice run just to make sure it works. And that won't actually send it out. But what it will show is it submits it to run it without sending emails, and you can see which people would meet the criteria. And if you find, for example, that everyone meets the criteria, you may want to go back and test it and look at it carefully, because maybe you're not tying it to the right item or whatever. And that way you can see how many people are getting it before you actually send it, and then go back and double check that the criteria are correct. Okay, so that's how you would create a weekly login reminder. But let's try something different. We're going to do another new agent. And this time we're going to do, do we want to do something tied to a course grade or a specific grade item? Most of the ones I have there are just reminders about, like that exam 3 reminder, exam 4 reminders. Those were sent out generally a day before the exams were due. They were generally open for a week, but a day before the due date, they got a reminder. You know, only the students who hadn't yet completed it will get a reminder. And you can also set it up so that if they are allowed to retake it, you can set it up so that if they still have another attempt left, they can be reminded that they still have a second chance to complete it by whatever due date you've got. But let's say we're going to do, let's say a course grade evaluation, or course grade concern, let's say. And so this is going to check or remind students if their course grades fall below passing. Let's say, and you could also set one up to send a congratulation to those students who are getting A's in the course. We don't have to be negative all the time, but we could put, I'm not going to put this in a category here, but let's say we're going to schedule this on no schedule. Normally you'd put this in at a certain date and probably as a repeating type of thing, but I don't want to accidentally do this. So again, all users visible in the class list, except now I'm not going to do it based on login activity. I'm going to use one of the release conditions. And this is what really makes these powerful. And the release conditions you have are, you could check whether students have submitted an assignment to a folder in a Dropbox, basically, whether they've received feedback on submission. So if you provide them with feedback on the submission, it can automatically send a student a reminder saying that they have just received feedback from you, and they should please, encourage them to check the feedback, to help them develop or whatever. You could also use a rubric score to send it out, so that if you are using a rubric, it will send them, you can check what the rubric scores are, and also, send appropriate feedback to them. Or if they have not yet submitted to a folder, you can send them a reminder if the due date is approaching. And again, these only go out to the people who have triggered that condition. Now, here's something we used last year, and I'm hoping we'll do the same thing this year. We created certificates for people based on a certain number of workshops attended. I think we created a silver, gold, and platinum, maybe, certificates or something like that. Maybe it was tin, or no, it was silver, bronze, and gold or something like that. And basically, we created a gradebook column, and we could notify people with an email that they had just received, faculty, that they had received a certificate in Brightspace, because it was listed as a Brightspace award, tied to a gradebook item where we just put in a grade or put in a number for the people based on what level they had received. We could also do it if they completed if you want to double check on them to make sure they're using the checklist, you could check whether they've completed the checklist or whether they've completed a specific item on the checklist. Or if their checklist is incomplete, or if there is an incomplete checklist item. So you can do any of those criteria. And once you select the checklist or the checklist item, you would have to identify which checklist, and it will give you the option of choosing among them, et cetera. You could also do it whether they've been enrolled in a group and send them a reminder with their group number. The org unit enrollment's probably not that relevant because that would be as soon as we go Brightspace. Section enrollment probably would also not be relevant. But you could also, if you're using a type of grading based on competencies, or basically if you're using, what are those called? If you have a series of competencies in the class and the students have to demonstrate that they've met those, well, they could be learning objectives, but there's a name for this in terms of a grading approach.
Standards-based grading?
Standards-based grading. So each of the competencies could be a standard, and you could have a number of things that would trigger that being satisfied. So, once they've mastered the competency, you can have it send an email out and you could get a copy of it, for example. Or you could do it tied to learning objectives if you program those in, the score on rubrics again, et cetera. Or if they have not yet achieved some competencies and it's approaching some deadline, you could send it. Or if they have not yet achieved some learning objective. You could also send out something when they've completed everything in the course. SUNY does this when they set up the self-study courses for people when we were learning Brightspace, for example. You could use a content visit, but visiting a content topic means they've opened the page. It doesn't mean they've read it. It doesn't mean they've done anything with it. And similarly for all of these. So I generally wouldn't do too much with that. Although you could combine it with a not read or not visited if they're doing poorly. So you could say, you did poorly. You didn't do as well as we had hoped on the summative assessment, but you also hadn't read the material or completed the readings that you were supposed to do before attempting those, or et cetera. So you can do multiple conditions using and or conditions. And similarly, you could do the same thing with discussion posts, whether they posted, whether they haven't posted, whether they've gotten scores on it. And a really useful thing, let's say we want to do it for a grade value on a grade value on a grade item. And let's do that. And I'm going to, if this is an overall grade check, I've got a lot of grades in this course for students. All of them are a fairly small weight, but one of the grades should be the overall course grade. And I'm not seeing that. You may have to create another. Okay, so you may have to create another one, but I think. I guess maybe no, it's not the release. Maybe it is a release final grade score. I know I've done this in classes. I may have created another grade that was just a copy of the course final grade, but you could certainly do it for individual grade items, or you could do it in each grade book category. So for example, you could have a grade item, which is the overall grade on practice quizzes or on module quizzes or whatever. And then you could, tie it to that. You could also do it to completed quizzes or surveys, whether they completed them or not. Let's say we want to do it for, I know there's an overall, I hope this is not wrong, but let's say it's a release final grade score. And here you want to do it with a final grade. No, that's not it. This was not, I know there was a gradebook column in there, and the gradebook has a final grade, and that should have shown up in the gradebook item. Let's try the grade value on a grade item. And it is not showing the overall course grade. Okay, well, I guess this isn't going to work quite the way I thought. But in any case, you could do it to specific exam scores. Let's say you want to do it this, and I'll rename this. Let's say this is exam 1, and in fact, it's probably not a bad idea to create a customized one for each of your exams anyway. So so I put it in, you have to put in the criteria, and it can be less than or equal to, less than, greater than or equal to, greater than, between, or not between. So you can set up a whole series of these. If the grade falls below some threshold, they get one message. You can create a copy of this with different criteria. If the grade is between 2 items, then they get a different message. If the grade is above a certain threshold, they might get another item praising them for how well they're doing and so forth. Let's say we want to do this if it's less than or equal, and let's say this is equal to 50%. And then we'll create that. And we will then, we'll say this is going to be a mess in action, and it's going to be in only the first time it's satisfied, let's say, and we'll send an email. And here, again, you would put in that special email address, which is email initiating user. And because that would give the full email address of the student. We'll close that, paste that in here. And then we would put the subject, grade on exam. Was that exam 1? Whatever it was. It's nice to make sure you get the right one. And then you would put in hi, and then you would put in initiating user first name. Or again, if you don't remember that, and that should be a cap here, you could just go to the replace string here, and it is right there, and just copy and paste that in, which is probably not a bad thing to do to avoid typos, because in fact, I should have put in a capital F. So I don't know if the case matters, but let's just be safe and put it in like this. And then you would just put in a message to the student saying, I see that you struggled a bit on this exam. You may want to make sure that you work through the practice problems, the videos, and perhaps using some of the support videos. And if, my office hours are during these hours, et cetera. So put in a message reminding them that they have support and that you would like to see them being successful. And it's a challenging course. It's normal to struggle at times, and all those wise messages types of things. And that's kind of it. And you can see these were reminders before the things were due. This was a class of 280 students. And you can see a lot of students were not completing things a day before the due dates, which is not always that surprising. There was apparently, I messed up on that one apparently. But depending on I think module 6 was right around a holiday. So there were more people who hadn't done it, and so on. But those reminders go out, and when I first started doing this, the first time we moved to Brightspace, it dramatically reduced the number of people who missed due dates on things. That those reminders going out just a day before generally reduced the number of people who missed particular low stakes exams. Most of those items are mostly less than 1% of the course grade at least for the study plan things. But it dramatically increased the proportion of the class that completed them before they arrived in class. And that allowed students to do so much better on the group work and the clicker questions and other things they were actually doing in the classroom because they were coming to class prepared, which made it so much more productive. So, so that's all I've got. There's a lot you can do with this. So again, when you create an agent, let's just pick one of these here, for example. You can also, when you create it, you could also add under criteria, you could also add additional criteria. And right now it's any condition, but you can also set it for all criteria. So if there's a series of things, if you want to check whether they've completed something and whether they've done something else, you can build that right into the criteria and get a customized version tied to the intersection of those two conditions if all of them must be met. Or if you're just checking whether they've missed one of 2 or 3 of things, you could send it out and have it check all those and say you've missed one or more of these quizzes, et cetera. And there we go. So any questions? It's a lot of material, but it's really not that hard to do it in practice. And it helps students. And where'd Zoom go? Hmm? Did I, well, it's still going on. Where is Zoom?
It's right there. Oh, see the-
This thing? Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm used to using two screens. Sorry. I've gotten spoiled and I'm tired. Any questions, Zoe?
No, this was really helpful. Thank you.
Sure. And if you need any help, let me know. I'm happy to help with any of this.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Okay. Have a good day.
You
I've got to
too.
get off to my 2 o'clock session in
On-
3.
yeah, take care.
See you
Bye.
later. Bye.